Very exciting conversation with the 40th U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo. What an absolute pleasure it is to have you here in India and have you here in conversation with us here on CNBC-TV18 in front of an audience of young women who are going to be charting out their course in life. And, I would typically not start with your educational qualifications, but I really want to, because what a checkered career you've had, but what a checkered past you've had as well. Harvard, Yale, Oxford, a Rhodes Scholar. How do you feel, Gina Raimondo, being back in a classroom today, here in India, speaking to these young girls?
Yeah. Well, to be very truthful, when I first walked in, I felt a little old because
that makes the two of us.
Seeing these young women, I was thinking, oh my goodness, college, you all look so young, and that makes me optimistic for our future. First of all, how exciting to be here the day after International Women's Day and Women's History Month. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to participate in the Holy celebration.
Did you have fun?
So fun. I had 3 shampoos, though, to get through the rest of my day. But yeah, look, it's really exciting and special for me to be here, I think, and to hear what a special college this is. And I would just say that so many of us have paved the way for you, and would just tell you that you have all the talent and skill and education to go forward in whatever path you choose, government, journalism, business, but do something. Yeah? Do something. Not for yourselves, but because what you have to contribute to the world needs to be contributed.
And I think that is the perfect message to send out here this morning, not just to the young women who are in this room, but to the many who are watching this program as well. But Secretary, I want to talk to you about the India-U.S. relationship, since you are here leading a large U.S. delegation. You've just met with venture capitalists and young Indian entrepreneurs. There's a thriving startup ecosystem here. A few weeks ago when that historic Air India-Boeing deal was inked, you said that this is a thriving relationship. I want to understand from you, as you sit here in India, what do you believe the future looks like as far as this relationship is concerned? What are you most confident of? What are you most optimistic about?
Yeah, well, I should say we are very optimistic overall. So that deal that you referenced was for hundreds of airplanes from Boeing, which we think and believe will lead to many more, which will create many jobs here in India and many jobs back at home in the United States. And that's just, of course, one deal. But I've just come from meeting with several entrepreneurs, women, by the way, several women who run unicorns, billion-dollar business, privately held businesses here. I think there's so much, India is already a large trading partner with the United States. We share democracy. We share common values. And I am here. I brought 10 leading U.S. CEOs with me. They're, as you say, a large delegation. I think that they're, as you said, we're hoping to enter a new era of even increased trade. And that is why we have so much optimism.
When you talk about a new era of increased trade between both sides, can you quantify that for us? I mean, what is the aspiration? What is it that you believe is the true potential, and where do you believe we could be in the next 5 years in terms of trade?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a number per se. I think, but the rate at which India is growing, I mean, by some estimates, India is the fastest growing, large economy. The rate at which you are growing, people, the group we just came from is talking about a doubling of, certain kind of business in the near term. I think that tech, there is a lot to be said for the relationships we already have as among U.S. tech companies and Indian tech companies. So I think that, and the supply, I think we're going to talk about supply chains in a little bit. I mean, I think there's just huge opportunities in what India has, not only, a billion-plus people, a large English-speaking population, a well-trained population, a stable business environment, a strong rule of law, a vibrant democracy, a long history of doing business with the United States. All of that is so important for us to build on.
You know, you preempted my question on supply chain resilience, and let me address that issue because the U.S.-India commercial dialogue has restarted after a gap of 3 years, and I'm given to understand that supply chain resilience is going to be a key focus area of the dialogue between both sides. What should that lead to? What are the outcomes that you're hopeful of from the dialogue restarting?
Yes. So we are restarting it. We'll be having a meeting tomorrow. I'll be here with my counterpart, Minister Piyush Goyal, and we'll be restarting that, again, with the feeling of optimism. Look, I think that COVID really opened the world's eyes to how vulnerable our supply chains were. And supply chains are often too concentrated in a particular geography. And so that leaves you vulnerable to not just COVID, but any kind of a natural disaster, geopolitical tensions, et cetera. And so U.S. companies, many of which I have with me on this visit, are interested to diversify their supply chains. You know, I'll give you a statistic. Last year in the United States, Ford Motor Company, the employees of Ford Motor Company making cars in the U.S. state of Michigan only worked a full week 3 times in the year.
Wow.
The reason was because they couldn't access enough semiconductors. And nowadays in cars, you know, an electric vehicle, there's over 1,000 semiconductors. They couldn't get the semiconductors even for the windshield wipers. So they couldn't assemble the car. My point is, we're not producing enough semiconductors, and we're getting them all from either just Taiwan or just packaged in Malaysia, and it exposes us to incredible disruptions. So I think what India offers is, I think India stands to gain actually quite tremendously from the move for multinational companies wanting to be more resilient in their supply chain.
You know, staying with the issue of supply chain resilience, and you talked about the semiconductor shortage, and it wasn't just U.S. companies that were impacted. Companies here in India and across the world were impacted on account of specifically the semiconductor shortage that we saw. So on that front, the U.S. has made its intention very clear to manufacture semiconductors in the U.S. The CHIPS Act has been passed. I know you've said previously that America needs to lead this, and it is America's obligation to lead this. In India, we've just announced a package to also push semiconductor manufacturing. But where do you then see the headroom for potential partnership and collaboration between India and the U.S. when both sides are hoping to manufacture domestically?
Yeah, and both can. Both can. Certainly our goal is not to be self-sufficient. You know, so, you know, for example, in semiconductors now, the United States and the world actually is overly dependent on Taiwan. 93% of the world's most advanced semiconductors are produced in Taiwan. That isn't, by no measure is that stable or resilient. Yeah, now, but having said that, we never expect to make all of the semiconductors that in America that we consume. That is not the goal. And in fact, we have, and I have said this many times, a desire to work closely with our allies, including India, as we make this investment. You know, one of the dangers of any kind of industrial policy like this is you don't coordinate with your allies, you compete with your allies, and so there's a race, you know, a subsidy race, or there's a glut. You know, if Europe is considering a similar subsidy, if we all put our subsidy into the same area, you have a glut of one kind of chip and not enough of another. So the challenge here, which is it's complicated, this is a very complex situation, is, but I think women can think in like 3D, is to work with our allies to create a deep ecosystem in the United States. But also, I think there's jobs to be created in India, you know, and I think also our national security interests in many ways are aligned. And so I think it makes sense that we would work together.
And if I can just follow that up with, where is the engagement on this front with the Indian government as far as semiconductors specifically are concerned? Because as you said, it serves our interest from a security standpoint, but at the end of the day, you also don't want to end up in a situation of overcapacity, and that's something that the World Bank, etc., have cautioned countries about. So how do you balance? And it is going to be a fine balance, as you point out.
It will be difficult. So I don't want to break any news today that I'm not supposed to.
I was hoping.
But, I'm working very closely with my counterpart, and tomorrow we'll have the official meetings of the CEO Forum and the Commercial Dialogue, and we've been talking a great deal about semiconductors. And so we will have a formal discussion as between the U.S. government and the government of India around semiconductors. How do we purposefully strategize and plan? For example, India is home to a massive amount of semiconductor design talent. The United States leads the world in semiconductor design. We have a synergy there. Having said that, it's a semiconductor supply chain is incredibly complex, from rare earths, critical minerals, chemicals, silicon, actual manufacturing. So although I am not naive to the complexity, I am optimistic that working with our allies and having this dialogue will accrue to the benefit of both of our countries.
Well, you have given us a headline that there is going to be a purposeful dialogue between India and the U.S. specifically on the issue of semiconductors.